Hi, everybody. Seth Ressler here. Happy New Year. Becky and I will be back before the end of January with brand new episodes of the Debrief podcast. Until then, we're sharing with you some of our favorite conversations that we've had over the years. Now, just last week, we received some sad news. Allee Willis, the Detroit songwriter, passed away. She was responsible for such hits as Earth, Wind & Fire's classic September and the theme song to the hit television show Friends. Now, anybody who spent any time with Allee Willis knows that her love for the city of Detroit was just infectious. She had this overwhelming enthusiasm about the place that she came from, as Becky found out when she interviewed her just a couple of years ago. We wanted to reshare that conversation with you in tribute and memory of Allee Willis. May she rest in peace.
Hi, Allee. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
Hello.
I wanted to start out by you just telling us your background. I know you went to Mumford High School. Tell us a little bit about growing up in Detroit.
Loved growing up in Detroit. I grew up here in the 50s and 60s, which was an incredible time in Detroit. Constant innovation all around you, incredible design sense, colors, cars, fashion, everything. And, of course, it was a city with its own soundtrack, Motown, which for me, between the design aspects of the city and Motown and all the Detroit labels, because there were actually a lot of Detroit labels that everyone considers Motown, but that and the radio stations here, everything was incredible. And I basically have not changed since I'm a kid. So these things had tremendous influence on me. Motown specifically, I would, on the weekends, escape whenever I could, literally escape if my parents wouldn't drive me down there. And I would go and sit out on the front lawn, and you could see everyone walking in and out. And a lot of times you could hear things through the walls. So I was like learning bass lines and string lines a lot of times, well, all the time before the records, came out. So, and I never, ever, ever to this day learned how to play an instrument. And I write both music and lyrics. So I always say, my lessons were sitting out on that lawn in front of Motown. And still, I hear it in my head. And that's how it happened. So I absolutely feel like if I grew up anywhere else, I probably would have been a veterinarian, But here, there was no escaping it. And I do a lot of different things besides music. Very deep into technology. I have a whole separate art career, which is everything from painting to sculpture to set design. I direct, I produce, and I don't know how to do any of those things. So I just do it in I go, I want to do this. I figure out how to do it, and I just plow ahead. And that to me is a very Detroit spirit. Always have identified with the underdog. And, if you want to do it, you don't necessarily have to have the means to do it. You have to have guts, you have to have balls, you have to have creativity, ingenuity, and you're set if you have the guts to go for it.
I think that's so true. It's kind of like me doing this podcast. I had no idea, but I just jumped in and said yes and figure it out.
There you go.
So I'm really interested when you say you don't play music and how you just kind of got into this. Like, what is your process then? Like, how do you start writing a song and then where does it go from there?
Well, first of all, it changes from song to song and it changes depending on the circumstance. Am I just writing because I hear something in my head, or am I writing for someone specific? If I'm writing for and with someone specific, you're really there as a collaborator to bring out what it is they want to say. And that can, the different degrees that can happen as to whether they are really a good songwriter or, which is oftentimes the case, they have no songwriting skills whatsoever, but they want to have written the song. Those are a complete pain in the ass. Sometimes the more famous they get, the worse that situation is. But yet I learned a lot from those things, because you have to be very patient and figure out how to get something out of someone who doesn't necessarily know how to get it out. But the ideal collaborations are with people whose talent completely turns you on. In my case, if they are a great player, makes it much easier for me. If they're playing in a style that I myself, if I could, would play. But I'm very known for, someone sitting down at the keyboard, let's say, and I literally lift their hands up and like clunk it down on the right beat. You can move things around in the computer after, but usually I can start by banging pencils together. I can write to anything. So like if the things were to fall off the bed right now, I could write to that, just any sound. But ideally I am working with someone I'm really comfortable with. I love the way they play. And usually as soon as fingers hit a keyboard or a guitar, I can hear a melody and begin. So
for instance, like your big song September with Earth, Wind, and Fire, how did that go down?
Well, September was that was a situation where I started writing with Verdine White, who's the bass player to this day in the group, one of the founding members. His brother was Maurice White, who put the group together. And I started writing with Verdine, and he said to me, I'm going to tell my brother about you. And Earth, Wind, and Fire was my absolute favorite group, and Maurice White, to this day, my favorite singer ever. So I didn't think that would happen, because at that time, it was 1978, I was on food stamps, I was getting medical assistance. You were as close to being a starving songwriter on welfare as you could get. So the thought of working with Earth, Wind, and Fire, who were like really starting to be massive, was incredible. But one night the phone rang, and there was Maurice, and he asked not if I wanted to write a song, but if I wanted to write the entire next Earth, Wind, and Fire album with him, because Verdine just was going on about me. So I went into the studio the next day almost thinking, no, Verdine is like playing a joke on me. This is not going to happen. And the whole band was there, and they had just started on the intro to September, which is exactly as you hear it on the record today. And it was just this happy sounding, absolutely from bar one, an obvious hit. So I just thought, please let this be what he wanted me to work on. And so on that one, I was more lyrics. I prefer to be both, but I mean, it was Earth, Wind, and Fire. So in I go. And so that was the very first song we started on. And while we were writing September, we were also writing the whole next I Am album, which is what Boogie Wonderland was on. But Boogie Wonderland, which I did do both music and lyrics on, that was with another writer, John Lynn, who I was friends with. He had also written for Earth, Wind, and Fire before. So that was a separate song that we wrote and took in that Maurice didn't have anything to do with the writing of. But usually I was writing with Maurice and whoever else in the group was, partaking in the song.
All right, Allee, I have to ask you, what is the significance to the 21st night of September?
I get asked that more than any question. Although my favorite question is when someone says to me, oh, I've never heard of you, written anything I know. I'm like, get ready, motherfucker. Okay. The first thing that Maurice asked me when we got together was if I knew anything about Eastern philosophies, because a lot of their lyrics are based on that. He's an incredibly spiritual man. I literally did not know what he was talking about. I mean, I always say I was about as evolved as pop rocks. I was just total pop culture. But and he actually he gave me a list of books. He sent me to the spiritual bookstore. I got all these books. I got so confused. It was crazy. But the first song that he needed written he just wanted a very poppy soul song that could go on Earth, Wind & Fire's Greatest Hits Volume 1. They needed one single. And then anything else we wrote would go on the I Am album. And the only things he told me were that he and Al McKay, was the guitar player in Earth, Wind & Fire, and one of the best songwriters ever, that they had written 2 songs that they viewed as kind of companion pieces, and they wanted this song to be the third in the trilogy. The first 2 had been out already and had been hits. The first one was Sing a Song, Earth, Wind & Fire. Second was The Emotions, Best of My Love, one of the greatest pop records ever. So it was clear to me that this one needed to be the happiest sounding. And he told me the only info he gave me is that he wanted it called September. And the date, which everyone asked me about, because people come up to me and say, oh, my birthday's on the 21st of September. I got married on the 21st of September. What's the significance? And I go, there is no significance. It just sang better than all the rest of them. Even Mark Cuban, I used to be partners with him. And he got married on the 21st of September, so he would remember his anniversary. So I know it's like an important day to people. I found out 1 month ago, today, 1 month ago, I was talking to Maurice's wife, and she said, you know the significance to the 21st, don't you? And I said, absolutely not. It just sang better than anything. And that was the date their son was supposed to be born. He ended up coming a few weeks later. But so I only found out in 2018 that there actually was significance to the 21st night of September. Yeah, so that's pretty incredible.
You know, that's something you also hear from Steve Perry when he talks about Journey and Don't Stop Believing. When he sang South Detroit, there's obviously no South Detroit, but he said it just sang better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I learned that lesson from Maurice. A lot of times, if you pride yourself on being a great lyricist, I think being a great lyricist is much harder than being a great music writer. Music, you can always plop your hand down on a keyboard and hear a chord. You can always strum a guitar. You can always hit a spoon on the table. There's something to bounce off of. Lyrics, you are just pulling them out of thin air. And I was a journalism major in college. I went to University of Wisconsin. And I felt that lyrics should have some real journalistic, really be well written, which so many pop lyrics are not. And September was, as we wrote it, it was an incredibly simple song. Do you remember the 21st night of September? Love was changing the minds of pretenders while chasing the clouds away. And I was like miserable. I kept saying, no, this has to be, it's such a hit. We have to up the intellectuality of it. And he led me on to believe that might happen, but I could also see that he was really happy the way that it was going. And when we got to the chorus, he, as all writers that I know do, you have certain phrases that feel comfortable for you. So as you're writing melodies, you use this kind of made-up gibberish, these syllables that feel good to you. And you can kind of tell, you can get an idea of what the pocket of the song is. And then you fill in the real lyric later. So Maurice's go-to phrase was "ba-de-ya." And he would, any song he wrote, like I always say, That's the Way of the World would have been, ba-de-ya, ba-de-ya. And then you go back and you fill it in. So he had, when we, got the melody, ba-de-ya, say, do you remember? Ba-de-ya, dancing in September. Ba-de-ya, never was a cloudy day. So I kept saying, we have got to change ba-de-ya. It's what does it mean? It's too much. It's a hit. People, it's got to be a lyric someone can relate to. And this went on for about 2 months because we wrote the bulk of it as soon as we met. But then you're interspersing these other songs. So it was the final night of recording. And deadline was at midnight. It was maybe 10 minutes to midnight. He's doing his final vocal. And I was literally on my knees, clutching his thighs. I always say he had the absolute best thighs in the history of show business. And begging him, please, can we change Badia? And it was clear it wasn't going to happen. So he was so spiritual and so calm all the time. So I just finally said to him, what the does Badia mean? And he essentially said to me, who the cares? So I always say I learned the best lesson of my songwriting career, which was never let the lyric get in the way of the groove. If something feels good and it's in the pocket, the beat is there, the melody is there, the spirit is there, that spirit is going to let people know what you mean better than any actual words ever would.
Oh, I can't imagine it being different now.
And
it's
it was,
perfect.
though I do get a kick out of what people think that is.
I'm sure.
Which I also get asked all the time. Sure. The biggest guess is probably a lot of people think it's party on. That you'd have to kill me before I ever wrote something like that.
So, Allee, I have to ask you about the Friends theme song. That meant a lot to me, even so much so that at my wedding, my friends requested that song, and we all got out on the dance floor, and it just symbolized such an important time in my life for just being young and having close friends that had your back and just trying to make it in life.
Well, all it meant to me was that I was trying to get out of my publishing deal, and I owed a seventh of a song, and I wrote it to get out of my deal. So, of course, it ended up being a blessing, in disguise. Never would have written it had I not wanted to get out. That was 1994. 3 years before I'd stumbled onto the internet and became completely obsessed. This is before there was even graphics on the internet. And I had this idea that this was a very social space, because people could be linked in from all over the world. So came up with the idea of a social network. 1991, Mark Cuban became my CEO. But between the two of us, people just thought we were crazy. What do you mean people are going to live in, cyberspace? That, there won't be physical product anymore on records, or radio stations will become, more irrelevant. And and how will people be friends in in this ether, So, but I wanted to concentrate on this full time. So I had a songwriting quota for the first time, and I used to be a machine. I was getting over 100 songs cut a year, which meant I'd be writing 500-600 songs a year. But this was the first time that my mind was really drifting away from music, even though I had been doing a lot of other stuff, a lot of set design, a lot of production designing. I had a whole separate art career. But I could always integrate that in well with the music. Now you're thinking about an entirely different, a medium that no one understands, a social space that no one understands. So I felt like I needed to concentrate on it 100% of the time. And they said, my publisher was Warner Brothers, said, well, there's this TV show that's coming on in 3 weeks. No, it's not going to be a hit. We weren't going to have a theme song, but if there was a theme song and it was a hit, it would help promote this show, even though probably nothing will happen. And I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of my deal. So the music had been started already by Michael Skloff. He was married to one of the producers. And they sent the music over just to this little 45-second theme. And it was this very twangy, ultra-white sounding thing. I thought, oh, this thing's going to ruin my career if anyone hears this. And so I wrote the lyric to it, handed it in, thinking, okay, I'm out. That's all I cared about. I don't have to write songs again. And the show aired and exploded on that night. I mean, it before the show was over, it was this massive hit. And as far as the song went, a disc jockey in Nashville taped it off the TV, and then that night played this little 45-second piece back to back for 45 minutes. And they got so many requests that Warner Brothers said, no, we have to expand this into a full-length song. And so the Rembrandts then became part of the writing team as well. And, wrote an extra verse and a bridge. And the record came out like instantly. It was just like bang, bang, bang. And it actually became it was the biggest record of 1994. The sin of it is, though, that the Rembrandts didn't want to be known for the song. It's like no one who had anything to do with the song really wanted anything to do with it. We all had ulterior motives. They, because they didn't write it by themselves. They usually wrote all their stuff themselves. So they didn't want to release it as a single. So the shame of it is that it was the biggest record of the year and $0.00 for the sale, because you had to buy their album in order to get it. You couldn't buy it as a single. So, and the single was more popular than the album. So, but for something that to me was a total throwaway, for it to have lasted in the culture as long as it has and looks like no signs of stopping, that was one of the luckiest breaks I ever caught. And of course, I've become very attached to it, and it's fun to sing. And in my shows, I do all the songs as sing-alongs because everyone knows the songs. And I have a lot of fun with that one.
That's incredible. I wanted to talk about the awards, the one you won last night. So I got to meet you at the Detroit Music Awards.
Yeah.
And I thought your speech was the best of the night, I have to say. So you won the Distinguished Achievement Award and got this beautiful statue, mini 40 pounds, mini Spirit of Detroit statue.
Oh, Spirit of Detroit.
Spirit of Detroit, yeah. So... But what really struck me, if you could tell us about the support or lack thereof from your parents and your choice of career.
Well, it was my father. My mom, unfortunately, passed away when I was young, very suddenly. My father, who was a great guy, but had trouble with me because I was a little distinctive as a kid. And he really wanted me to fit in. So I was always wearing, my clothes were all these mixed patterns. My hair, always some form of wrong. And so he had problems with a lot of stuff with me, but nothing more than my absolute love and worship of black music. And the fact that I would sneak out and go sit on the lawn at Motown. This was like a neighborhood he didn't want me going into. And I was upset. I would only listen to black radio stations, which were always down on the right, of the dial. We'd have constant radio battles in the car. He's twisting it back to like CKLW. I'm going the other way to WJLB. So, when I went to college, he wrote me, a little letter. And usually, even if you're not close with your father, and I was close with him, I love you, or good luck, or something. And this letter, which I have to this day, just said, stay away from black culture, Dad. So, of course, that really didn't work. Sent me, the whole other way. And almost every artist I was writing for was black. So he would constantly say, can't you find a white artist to write for? And he wasn't a bigot, really, at all. He loved to push my buttons. And the way to push the biggest button was the black thing. And I always say that I got the last word because he passed away in 2002. And the very last thing I said to him, I leaned down and I whispered in his ear, like really loud. They probably could hear me down the hall. I just got the gig to write The Color Purple. And 2 hours later, boom, he was gone. So really, I don't know what his karma was to get a daughter like me. But I went way the other way. But I have a lot of fun with it today, so what can I say?
Well, you're the funkiest.
Yeah, I'm the funky one.
For sure. And how about this other award you have coming up?
Yeah, that I'm pretty excited about that. I'm being inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame by Verdine White, playing September. And I didn't think that was going to be such a big deal for me, but it's a big deal. Yeah, it really made me feel like, okay, you did it, And I have other awards, and they're always exciting to get. But this one kind of feels like on a different level, Hall of Fame. So, and supposedly in the music industry, it's of all of the events, it's the killer one. Because all the famous songwriters come, which includes, tons of artists. And it's everyone just sits around and sings. So it's supposed to be pretty good.
I think that's fantastic because songwriters, I feel, don't always get the accolades. And
bottom of the barrel,
exactly.
Bottom rung on the ladder, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Because without the songwriter, there is nothing. It was like Billboard magazine. You would list the top 200. And, the artist's name would come first, then the producer, then the songwriter. Songwriters' names were the first ones to disappear when they wanted to, close things. Now, how do you find a record? Shazam or whatever. No songwriter credits. And I've always thought that songwriters, of all of the tiers, from artist, producer, on down, the absolute most soulful ones are the songwriters, without question. And you do it a lot of time with complete lack of recognition. So, and there is a million ways for people to cut you out of your royalties. And that happens to everyone in music, but songwriters especially. From very obvious things like famous artists who can't write, but yet they want to be the songwriter. It brings them money. They want to own the publishing. So your percentages get, whacked way down. Like credits not being listed. So I always really appreciate when people know who the songwriter was. It means they're really dedicated. Like one of my really close friends is RuPaul. And we, got friendly originally, probably 15 years ago now, because I have never to this day known anyone who knows more songwriters. Like, he will be able to tell you the songwriter on the record before he'll be able to tell you who the producer, was. So, I think people with heart kind of know it. But it's a good way to be overlooked. When I talk to a lot of kids at schools and stuff, and especially these days, they want to be a star. It's not about working up to doing it. It's not about earning it. It's like, how do I become famous? And when they want to be songwriters, I go, you have got to love what you're doing, because if you are in it, for the recognition, this is the wrong. Way the wrong path. If you're in it to get rich, way the wrong path. You just have to do it because you love it, and nothing makes you happier.
I think that's good advice for anything you're trying to do, for sure. So tell us a little bit about what you're working on now. I know you had that big Detroit song with so many people.
That was a 5-year project. Well, first of all, I had just come out of a 5-year project, which was co-writing the Color Purple musical. And I'm a self-financed artist. So I was always thinking about something to do in Detroit because I loved the city so much. But I didn't have money to invest in anything. So I thought, and this was at a time when people were saying horrible things about Detroit, which went on for decades. But this would have been 2011. And I thought, I love this city. And I love the city because I think the people in the city have incredible heart and soul. And I wanted to do something that could show that. So I thought, what are the two things I do best? I write songs. I throw parties. I take parties as seriously as music, if not more. So I thought, what if I write a song and I will throw a series of parties around the city, which will really be sing-alongs, and we'll teach people the songs on the spot, the song on the spot. So I did that over a 2.5-year period. I came back at least 20 times, I would say, and we did 70 sing-alongs all around the city, from big places like the DIA and Detroit Historical Society to, I did my schools. We went to Mumford, we went to Cass, we went into people's living rooms. The people that bought the house from my dad in 1965, where I grew up, still live in that house. So one of the sing-alongs was in my living room. Delicatessens, churches, like everywhere. And I got 5,000 lead singers, all Detroiters. Anyone who wanted to sing or play on the record could. And then that took about 2.5 years because we were doing it on just this simple equipment. We weren't like bringing in huge, recording rigs. Like every engineer said, this is never going to work. Like everything's going to be out of phase. And it was like, I don't know how to do things right anyway. So what do I care? It's like, don't tell me it's not going to work. And then I spent about 2 years editing that. It took us over a year to be able to hear all of the tracks in one place because I came back with 5,000 tracks, each with 10 to 250 voices on them. So that was kind of nightmarish. But even more was putting the video together, which was originally supposed to be a feature-length documentary, which I still have all the footage for. But there were a lot of circumstances, and it just wasn't going to happen. So I did it because it was a project where I could show my multimedia-ness as well, so that it meant I could do the sonic part of it, the visual part of it, the animating part of it, all of it. And finally put it together. It took 5 years, and this is every day. I was not working this into other things that I was doing. That is all I did for 5 years.
And where can people see it?
Well, the easiest place is just go on YouTube and search for Allee Willis. Allee is Allee. It's not the normal spelling. Willis, the D. And you can see it there. But, it's on Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, Google Play, wherever. But you should see it with the visual. And I really did it to be a kind of theme song to accompany the reimagining of Detroit. But at that time, there was no reimagining of Detroit. It was right when the bankruptcy, was announced, which I felt was even more important, to do it.
That's what I thought when I saw it, especially on the big screen. I mean, I had seen it on my computer, but then when I saw it at the big screen at the DMAs, it was like, wait, she did this before it was cool to be thinking this.
No, I did not jump into this like everyone is jumping into Detroit.
No,
now.
You were trendsetting, definitely. Yeah.
So
I want to talk about these new sing-along parties that you have coming up.
Yeah. Well, it's a performance. It's a one-woman show. It's got a few people in it, but basically one-woman show. And I do all the songs as sing-alongs because everyone knows the songs. I tell a lot of stories about how they're written. But my stories are completely bizarre. They're not normal songwriter stories. I always use the example of Neutron Dance, which was the Pointer Sisters from Beverly Hills Cop, that the Russians mistranslated Neutron Dance as Neutron Bomb, and I was named one of the most dangerous subversives living in the United States. Yeah, so my stories are extreme. I have a vast, really one of the world's largest, most documented pop culture collections. I auction off stuff from the collections there. I approach performing the same way I approach everything else. I don't know what the I'm doing. So there's constant mistakes happening on stage. I am continually directing and producing it as I'm performing it. And the more things go wrong, the funnier the show gets. It used to upset me, and then I thought, oh no, this is the best comedy there is. The set's collapsing on my head, whatever. I hand make the entire set. So I'm trying to make it feel as much like you're walking into my living room and I'm having a party. So this is, it's theater seating. So it's not like everyone, can jump up. But I just try and make it as loose as possible. I guarantee it is unlike any other singer-songwriter show you've ever seen.
The D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit's arts and entertainment scene.